So, before I get into the main topic of this video, first, Stefan Molyneux has now been banned on Twitter just days after YouTube removed him. So, we know that following the Alex Jones banning a couple of years ago, Silicon Valley social networks often coordinate these things. I'd call that collusion. Molyneux is on both Minds and Gab. The left's cultural revolution continues at pace, it seems. We'll all be removed on mainstream platforms before too long, of course, but I'm prepared for this. You'll find me on Gab, Minds, and on BitChute, where all my videos are archived. In addition, Dr. E. Michael Jones has been banned on YouTube. You can find his BitChute channel linked below, and also visit his website, culturewars.com. And so we begin with this story from Melbourne, Australia.
First, though, Victoria has recorded its second worst day since the coronavirus pandemic began, with 108 new cases. In an unprecedented measure, 9 public housing towers have been locked down. Residents there now locked in their homes for at least 5 days. And my understanding is from a source in Melbourne, Spring Street, the government there, that they might be extending the lockdowns not just to the hotspot suburbs, but to the metro area of Melbourne as well, and that could come as early as tomorrow.
Victoria. Why am I not surprised? Police state and house arrest. Brought to you by the Victorian government.
An unprecedented and extraordinarily extreme measure.
This is, in many respects, the most challenging issue that we have dealt with throughout this entire global pandemic.
9 public housing towers in complete lockdown. Nobody allowed to leave, nobody allowed to enter.
There will be no reason for any of those residents to leave their home for a period of at least 5 days, effective immediately.
What if they want to leave because they haven't actually committed any crime and they're human beings with inalienable human rights, and therefore their desire to leave their homes and have freedom of movement is not something you can take away from them, or at least it's not supposed to be in a so-called free country.
5 of these public housing towers are in Flemington. 4 are in North Melbourne. They contain a total of 1,345 units, approximately 3,000 people affected.
There will be a massive logistical task to make sure that those people are fed, given the support that they need. I think we're equal to that task.
I hear solitary confinement tends to have serious psychological effects on some people. Can you provide support in that regard? This is just unbelievable. 3,000 innocent people under house arrest, unable to leave their apartment because of an alleged COVID spike. Is this the future? The government announces some scary new graph data that no one is allowed to question, and then suddenly they can force people to stay in their homes against their will.
And I don't for a moment underestimate how challenging, how traumatic in some respects that will be.
At any point in time, 500 police will be enforcing this lockdown.
There will be a number of VicPol staff on each floor within these towers, and then a larger number of Victoria Police members will essentially police that hard lockdown at access points to these towers.
So the apartment blocks are sealed off. Presumably, if you step outside of your apartment, you'll find a police officer on your floor. That's not terrifying or anything.
A difficult decision was taken after a surge in transmissions within these towers. Residents will be locked down for at least 5 days as everyone is tested by health professionals.
And what happens if a person imprisoned in their home in this way decides to refuse this testing? What happens then? If the testing is mandatory and someone is literally going to come to your door to test you, I wonder if this will be the model for the vaccine also. Just think, police stationed throughout your apartment block. Wow.
Once we have all the test results back, which we believe is around a 5-day process, including the lab time, we'll be able to make further judgments about different groups within those towers, different policy and if you like, tailored responses, family by family, tower by tower.
It is possible that future lockdowns will be localised, like this one in Victoria, where apartment blocks, streets, neighbourhoods, suburbs, and city blocks will be cordoned off one by one, police surrounding them, and health professionals sent in to test and or vaccinate the people. Could this be the shape of things to come? By the way, on the subject of testing, we know that the efficacy of COVID testing is very questionable. In fact, this is from the CDC website. What do your results mean if you test positive? A positive test result shows you may have antibodies from an infection with the virus that causes COVID-19. However, there is a chance a positive result means that you have antibodies from an infection with a virus from the same family of viruses called coronaviruses, such as the one that causes the common cold. So basically, this is how the government and the media can justify sudden surges and spikes of COVID. Just test lots more people. Find bog standard common coronaviruses and antibodies and then chalk them up to COVID-19, and then suddenly it will look like there's tons of new cases. Just more rigging of the data. The sad thing is, this strategy is convincing most people on the planet. Anyway, regarding the story from Australia, this article is related to it, and it's from abc.net.au. Melbourne Public Housing Tower resident says community is being treated like criminals amid coronavirus lockdown. It was only when Tekeste Helu, not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly, tried to leave his building when he realised he was one of 3,000 people in mandatory lockdown. Mr. Helu, 27, lives with his grandmother in public housing on Racecourse Road, one of 9 Melbourne buildings that was placed into sudden hard lockdown on Saturday afternoon. But the first Mr. Helu was told was when he tried to leave to buy groceries, only to be greeted by the whole building surrounded by police. I'm thinking, what's going on? Has someone died or something, he said. The strict restrictions are due to a rise in coronavirus cases in the public housing towers and fears they may spread throughout the 1,345 units. Mr. Helu said the public housing residents were being targeted. We're treated like criminals pretty much, and they're only targeting the flats. I don't understand why it's a major target, Mr. Helu said. Julia Selin, who lives with her young son in a 2-bedroom apartment on the 12th floor of a tower on Racecourse Road, said losing her freedom was scary. It's harder when you've got children trying to keep them entertained, she told ABC Radio Melbourne on Sunday morning. It does really feel like we're in a prison. Miss Salin said her unit was a lonely place to be at the moment. Everyone else down the road, for example, they're allowed to leave their house for 4 reasons. That choice has been taken away from us, and I can't really understand why. Miss Salin said that by 10 a.m. on Sunday, 18 hours after the lockdown began, no one had come to the door to provide her with any information or food. She first heard about the lockdown from a post on Facebook. I went downstairs just to check if this was all true, and there were so many police officers there at that point, she said. I actually spoke to one of the officers, and he said the only information they had was that no one is allowed out. That's not absolutely terrifying or anything. She said she was told by an officer later that having food delivered was okay, but when the delivery worker arrived, they were not allowed near the building. So nobody knows what's going on, she said. I'm getting the whole, because the government said so, and this is for your own protection kind of vibe here. Anything can be justified under the argument that there's another fresh COVID-19 spike just going around, it seems. Now, there has been some good news on this. Serene Tefaha is a solicitor based in Melbourne, Victoria, and she's taking a class action case against the false imprisonment of the Flemington and North Melbourne residents. I'll include the website with her details linked below for you to check out. Well done, Serene. We need more solicitors, barristers and lawyers coming forward around the world to challenge the lockdown, mandatory face masks, the damage the shutdown has done to private businesses, as well as the social distancing policies, and the inevitable mandating of vaccines in the future. Speaking of legal action, there was a setback in the UK. Businessman Simon Dolan has attempted to legally challenge the lockdown, but the judge refused him permission. He said on Twitter, "Very disappointed to let you know that the judge refused permission to challenge the lockdown." He continues, "What this means is that the government have the right to impose lockdown whenever they choose. The courts believe that lockdown was entirely correct and proportionate." He went on to include some of the rulings on the effect on business. So far as the airline leasing business is concerned, there is simply no realistic basis on which it could be said that the regulations have caused the loss or damage to that business. On schools, the obligation to provide education has not been suspended. Education was being provided, but not on school premises. There has been discussion about the precise meaning of certain of the statements made, but it is not necessary to spend time dealing with that matter. On further impositions, the fact that restrictions may be imposed in future, depending on the progress of the pandemic, does not provide a good reason for reviewing the original versions of the regulations now. On family life, regulations do not, even arguably, involve a breach of the right to respect for private and family life guaranteed by Article 8 of the Convention on Proportion. It is simply arguable that the decision to make the regulations on 26th of March and to impose the restrictions contained in the regulations on that date was in any way disproportionate to the aim of combating the threat to public health. On freedoms, any interference is proportionate. The restrictions are limited. Persons remain free to live with family members or friends forming part of their household. They can communicate with others by means of communication such as telephones and internet facilities. And so Simon says the most draconian laws ever introduced in England with no parliamentary scrutiny, and they are seen to be fit and proper by the courts. England, 2020. We are considering an appeal. Finally, whilst this particular battle has been lost, the war really is just beginning. It looks like it's back to the drawing board on this one. Almost anything can be justified, it seems, if a pandemic is declared by the government. Both John Waters and Gemma O'Doherty here in Ireland received similar feedback and responses from the courts here. In Ireland, if the government wanted to enact an even more draconian lockdown next time, all they'd have to do is declare a state of emergency, and then it's basically considered wartime. So the greater good and in the interests of public safety arguments would be rolled out. Legal actions would become impossible if they simply closed the courts. My worry is that the long-term strategy might be to declare full martial law globally. I could be wrong about this, so take it with a pinch of salt, but that is my concern. Do what they did basically in Australia. Lock people in their homes and not let them out until they accept the vaccine. Now, I've said before that I didn't think this was going to happen, but after what's happened in Australia, I'm quite concerned now. As people go stir crazy, they'll be begging for the vaccine in their homes in order to have their freedoms restored. So I could see things like food rationing being introduced at this point. I could be wrong, again, as I say, but I'm at a point where I think we can put nothing past the maniacs behind this fiasco. If they're hell-bent on pushing their plans through, we have to be willing to consider all possibilities. Now, I want to also talk about this lady, Letitia Montana. She was refused healthcare in this hospital in Canada, I believe it's Toronto, until she wore a mask.
Areas of the hospital.
Ma'am, you're not allowed
Say that again, please.
in the hospital.
Why am I not allowed to video? I'm not allowed to video, but you're making me wear a mask. Otherwise, you're gonna deny me service if I don't wear a mask.
We're asking you.
I'm at St. Joseph's Hospital. They're telling me that if I don't wear a mask, they're not gonna assist me. They want me to leave. Whose policy is that?
Ministry of Health.
Ministry of Health policy.
She says, went to the emergency department at St. Joseph's Hospital in Toronto for a suspected broken finger. I was asked to wear a mask, which I refused to do. As a result, hospital staff asked me to leave and immediately called 3 security guards to escort me out. Now, what I find the most troubling aspect of this is that a lot of people in the comments below this tweet are against her, and they agree with the policy of the hospital. Comments like this one from As.Your.Dad, when you post something and it doesn't go your way. And Letitia replies, I couldn't care less. People need to know that Canadians are being denied access to public health care in this country if they refuse to obey nonsensical mandates. Alexandra Erin writes, no one refused you anything. This is a video of you declining to receive health care. Letitia sounds like a pretty smart girl because she can see the tyranny in this and not many other people can. And she replies, that's an interesting twist. What the video does not capture are the 3 burly security guards that showed up within 30 seconds and aggressively asked me to leave or call the police on me. Benita Wright says, so why not record the 3 burly security guards? Can't believe it if I don't see it. Randy Mayhem Singer says, imagine if they insisted on sterilizing their instruments before treating you. Imagine if they insisted on washing their hands before operating on you. But that's not the same thing, Randy. Masks are not going to protect you against the virus. And by the way, I have lots of links and data on this. So you can check out those in the source link below. All right, masks are simply another mandate in an ever-increasing laundry list of mandates that the public now have to comply with, or they don't get to go on public transport, go to the grocery store, or in this case, receive medical treatment. This is a compliance test. It's about making the populace obedient. Masks also make people sicker. They restrict breathing, decrease oxygen saturation levels, and build up microorganisms on the inside of the mask. A person took a picture of a measurement of their oxygen levels after 40 minutes with a mask on, and Dr. Marcus de Bruin responded on Twitter, "If I was your GP and you presented to me with that reading, I would seriously consider referring you to a hospital." How long before someone goes to a hospital and they receive the same kind of reaction that Letitia did, but for not being vaccinated? Again, the most concerning thing is the huge amount of snarky backlash that Letitia received on Twitter. She got ratioed for this. And I'll leave the thread for you to read. It won't be long before people who say things like wear a mask and don't be such a baby will be saying take your vaccine and digital immunity certificate and don't be a baby. And most of the people in this thread, well, they look young, well outside of the vulnerable age bracket for COVID. But most people still think that after several months now, that this is the Spanish flu meets the bubonic plague. This article is from the Washington Examiner. Stanford doctor, coronavirus fatality rate for people under 45, almost 0%. Stanford University's disease prevention chairman slammed using statewide lockdown measures as a response to the coronavirus, saying they were implemented based on bad data and inaccurate modelling. And we know that that inaccurate modelling was from Neil Ferguson of the Imperial College London. There are already more than 50 studies that have presented results on how many people in different countries and locations have developed antibodies to the virus, Dr. John Ioannidis said during a recent interview with Greek Reporter. Of course, none of these studies are perfect, but cumulatively, they provide useful composite evidence. A very crude estimate might suggest about 150 to 300 million or more people have already been infected around the world, far more than the 10 million documented cases. Ioannidis pointed out the mortality rate is low among young people who have contracted the virus. The death rate in a given country depends a lot on the age structure. Who are the people infected and how they are managed, Ioannidis said. For people younger than 45, the infection fatality rate is almost zero. For 45 to 70, it is probably about 0.05% to 0.3%. For those above 70, it escalates substantially. Do you now see the reason why elderly hospital patients were placed into care homes? Because they are vulnerable to COVID, and by placing them there, it would bolster the number of fatalities. The final thing I want to say is that recently I watched a great video by Dennis Rancourt on the COVID crisis, which you really need to check out. It's not a very long video, it's only about 15 minutes. He covers pretty much every key point of this plandemic. And at the end, he touches on the pushing of mandatory masks, that governments feel that they have to encourage the people to wear them in order to justify the lie they told and to hide the corruption behind it.
You convinced everyone that this really was a dangerous pandemic. What's the best way to convince everybody that we really had a killer here, that we came close to all dying and so on? What's the best way? Well, convince them that they have to wear a face mask. If you as an individual are so frightened that you're going to go and put a face mask on in the middle of summer, you are personally investing in the belief of that lie. And that is a powerful psychological way of convincing you that there was this danger and that what we need to do to save ourselves is to wear that mask, and the government didn't do anything wrong and they did the best they could, and thank God they told us what to do. And so the mask, I believe that this is the reason the establishment is so vehement about wearing masks and is so stuck on this mask idea, because it is a way to invest us personally into this lie and to get us acting this way. And when you see, people think that what you believe motivates what you're going to do, your action, but it also works the other way. Your action largely creates what you believe. Okay, if you agree to do something because someone is scaring you or convincing you with false arguments, the fact of doing it, you're going to be believing that lie. So I think that's what the masks are about.
This is an excellent point. Propaganda is enforced by behavior and repetition, and not only is the mask a symbol of subjugation and a compliance test, like I've said, as well as a preparation for mandatory vaccines, but it also makes the wearer an active and willing participant in the lie that they've been told. It also robs a person of their individuality and makes them anonymous in the crowd. Anyway, guys, I'm going to wrap this video up here. Thank you very much for watching. Once again, please subscribe and follow me over on BitChute, because inevitably when the ban hammer comes for me, that's where you're going to be able to find all of my new work. And feel free as well to download and re-upload this video where you like. I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.